Hello everyone and welcome to Heart and Hand Rangers podcast. This is your extra show for the week. My name is Cameron Bell. I'm your host on Extra as always, and it is a delight to be able to come back and speak to you for the main reason, the fact that if I'm talking to you, it's because real football is very close to returning. Joining me to celebrate the return of the world famous Glasgow Rangers is my very good friend, Mr. Alan Bradley. Alan, it's a weird feeling because under the previous manager, we welcomed international breaks. This has felt like a month since we've had an international break when we've actually wanted the proper football to return, and we're all still on the Philippe Clement Express to success.
Yeah,
great to have it back soon enough.
Absolutely, Cammy. It's great to be back in the extra as well. But no, I would agree with you. In the past, it's like my God, we need a break. I think what's been good, and obviously I see them in blocks, but if you look at the block really since Philippe Clement came in, it's been pretty much kind of top, apart from maybe one wee blip, but it's been so good. I'm like you, I'm absolutely champing at the bit now to go to the next step. And I think this will be key now, Cammy. Was the first block where everyone kind of get back on the kind of straight and narrow again? We started winning, the attitude was good and so on. Is this just when Gio went, suddenly it became, oh, training's all good, oh, we're all so motivated? Or is it really, which I think it is, it's more because of the new manager and that this will continue? And to me, this next block, I think we've got something like 9 games now coming up to Christmas. But if we could do really well during this, I think some real positivity there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, Alan, because obviously we returned to league action against Aberdeen on Sunday afternoon. Let's use the cliche, obviously it's a dress rehearsal for the League Cup final. That is literally around the corner. That's only a few short weeks away. But, undeniably, the manager has come in. He's had a real impact. I think, as you mentioned there, obviously it's been quite refreshing, is probably the word I would use, in terms of where you can see a lease of life coming in from players, several of them, and a number of different post-match interviews and commentary have said that it feels a lot like as if, it has been a breath of fresh air and it's coming at it from a different angle, etc., etc. I think for me, Alan, what's really important for us is to be able to try and make sure that we get back to a level of consistency that we had prior to the international break, because you just didn't want an interruption. And we've had to have one, understand that. But really what we want is to be able to get back to the way how we were playing prior to the break, the attitude that we had prior to the break. This is a test for the players to ensure, despite that interruption, we've set a standard for ourselves that we know that we can deliver against. The question is making sure that we don't allow ourselves any slippage in that regard.
Yeah, I think it's been a tricky one because at the end of this first block, I thought, that's it, we've got over it now, take a deep breath now. It gives us a couple of weeks where people with injuries and so on can come back. You can get a bit more time in the kind of training pitch with some of them and so on. But as you say, now you're thinking, shit, Sunday, Pittodrie, obviously. And the key now is, can we keep it going? As I say, I'm actually pretty confident. I know it's always tough up there and we'll get on to it. They're sitting 9th in the league. So if we can recapture anything like the form that we did in the past few weeks, Cammy, then go. And then let's get on to Europe as well and, just keep that momentum going.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we'll touch on the game in just a second as we kind of come into it. But I think there's something else, Alan, which I think is really interesting, that I think what this team has done, and I think via both performances and results, because we've spoken long and hard before about sometimes we can get a result, but the performance wasn't there. We know it's been something that's been aimed at Michael Beale in terms of, what's the design, what's the game plan, what's the approach, because we couldn't identify it. Mm-hmm. So sometimes we've had games that we've won, but hasn't been great performances. I feel like at the moment just now we've had some really strong, consistent performances and we've got results out the back of them. Defensively, we'll look far more solid. And it's always interesting to me because, and listen, you're slightly older than I am, but you'll also know that we went through that period where everybody knows that Aberdeen will be trying their hardest against Rangers. You're right, they're not in great shape. I understand all of that, but I still feel whenever they come up against this, whether at Ibrox or Pittodrie or anyone else, if we're seeing them at Hampden, they just have that extra zip, that extra wee bit of energy, shall we say, in terms of where that sits. It seems to lose itself whenever they happen to go across the east end of the city, but that's a separate conversation. Ultimately, we need to be able to go, and we know that this won't be an easy game for all of those factors. I dare say, through some sort of ridiculous scenario, they'll probably have a decent house at Pittodrie because of the fact that it's against us. We are the only show in town, so no doubt, a lot of the armchair fans, I think, who support Aberdeen will probably be coming along to Pittodrie to see us. So for me, I definitely feel there'll be a strong energy up there to try and certainly get something from the game against us.
I think you're right, and I think what would be good as well, probably not overstating it, after our last performance at Ibrox against them, we get sucked into that whole getting frustrated, letting them. It became a bit of heady tennis and physicality and so on, and let's not play the football. So, I think Rangers, we've got to go up here and really kind of get right into this game, match them physically, which is, always happens at Pittodrie, but not lose the head, Cammy, and not get frustrated and keep playing the football and do what Philip Clement's got now in terms of our structure and keep the shape. I think if we can do that, and all that noise that they're going to come up with, just kind of shut that out and focus, then we'll be fine. But as you say, and I've seen it, my God, for decades, Cammy, with them, I don't know, they're just a different breed, aren't they?
Well, yes, they are. And obviously, it would be remiss of us, Alan, not to poke fun at the noise that came out during the international break about the Aberdeen Cup final ticket fiasco. For anyone who has missed this, effectively what happened was Aberdeen put in via their loyalty point scheme that anyone above a certain number, I think it was 199 or something, you were eligible for tickets. Then what happened was, rather than break it down into tranches below that, they just went on general sale. They've then had to kind of scramble, Alan, to try and understand or identify where potentially some Aberdeen fans who happen to live in, a G or P postcode may potentially have decided to buy some tickets for their end. It appears to have got itself all sorted out, but it lends itself to this farce that Aberdeen wanted a split that was going to be a fairer allocation. They're not going to sell it out. They struggled to sell a decent percentage of the semi-final allocation. But it's the farce and the circus that is Scottish football that we ended up in this situation.
I think you're right, yeah, it's Scottish football, but in particularly I think the whole administration at Aberdeen, and I don't know, this whole kind of their mind kind of overruling them, because of the whole emotion, the Rangers thing. They're just not thinking rationally. The whole way they did it, Cammy, was just absolutely ridiculous. And as you say, I think quite ironically as well, one of the flies in the ointment as well will be, oh my goodness, we've got Aberdeen fans down in, I don't know, Glasgow postcodes in Edinburgh and so on. It just seems a complete mess. And as you say, it'll be really interesting to see in terms of ticket sales for for Sunday, how that one will go. Because I think even in the past, Cammy, when we've been up there more recently, there's still been big gaps over in their end and your kind of normal league games and so on.
Well, exactly. And I think that, as I say, I can never understand where this rivalry comes from. I understand the various different, variants that caused it through the 80s and 90s for them to be able to come back because they thought that they were big time. They've not been big time for a very, very long time. And again, like I say, they want to be able to try and keep this rivalry going with us. Before we come into the game, Alan, it'd be remiss of us not to talk about a couple of players that I certainly have come on our radar regarding the international break and how that served them. And first of all, we have to give a huge well done to Ross McCausland. Given his first full international, was voted by the fans player of the match for his full international debut. A wonderful accolade for him, and he's spoken at length in terms of how delighted he's been to represent his country. It's firstly, keen to get your thoughts on that. I'm sure you'll probably agree with me to say that it's fully deserved and a huge piece of recognition. My hope is that this is going to be the first of many international caps he has whilst playing for Rangers.
Very much the same as you, Cammy. I think the young laddie, he's done really well. I mean, he's taken his chance. Obviously, he's come on now and shown what he can do. To actually get in for Northern Ireland as well is brilliant. I think, obviously, his Rangers daft as well. I think his family are too. He's going to have a big decision to make, I think, because it's come January, isn't it, that potentially other clubs could approach. From a personal point of view, and I don't just mean this as a Rangers fan, but I mean, I would like him to stay with us, get into the team more regularly now, really establish himself then. And the guy is good enough. And if in the future he then wants to move on elsewhere, by all means, yeah, do it. And he would get all our support. But I just feel at this stage, Cammy, the laddie's got a lot of potential. And certainly from us, and I think the majority of the Rangers fans would just love to see him in a Rangers jersey for a good period of time, before any other moves, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we do need to hopefully be able to try and get him to put pen and paper and look at extending his time within the club. I think that you're right. We can get something like a development fee for him if a club signs him in a pre-con before next summer of something like 350,000 pounds. That's chicken feed, not only to a club that would probably sign him from down south and obviously within their playing budget, but it's a fractional value of what I think Ross McCausland will ultimately go on to cost in terms of what I think he's capable of achieving as well. I'm always very protective of our youths, Alan. I think that as a Rangers fan base, I think we always enjoy seeing a young player being able to come through, been able to embed himself within the first team. You've had the pleasure of being able to try and see 16-year-old Derek Johnson scoring cup winning goals, etc. But
Yeah.
I think it's always been like that for us, no matter your age and no matter what generation you came into the Rangers family and followed.
Even your Derek Fergusons, your wee and your aunts, as you say, all those kind of young laddies coming through. And I think as well, because they are, I don't know, we just seem to be far more emotionally attached to them. We are prepared to really kind of support them more, aren't we, and kind of get behind them. So I think it's a great environment for young Ross to be playing in, because we will love this as kind of one of our guys coming through and he's developed and so on. So no, you're right. And ultimately, I think in terms of the talking about that, the kind of pillar as well, in terms of the kind of trading model and so on, the more laddies that we can successfully see coming through, coming in, establishing themselves within our team, and then moving on, like a Nathan Patterson or whatever it would be, surely that must be the way to do it, rather than spending, I don't know, at times several million quid on players, Cammy, that come in and just don't make it, and I don't know. I certainly think he fits more into that kind of model. But as I say, I wouldn't want to see the wee laddie going anytime soon. I would rather if he could stay on maybe a season or so and just really kind of, because by doing that as well, and then hopefully we'll get more games in Northern Ireland too, then the future's going to be great for him.
Yeah, and I think that we're conscious that the club very much does operate within that player trading model, as you say. So, we've seen the benefit of that already with Nathan Patterson. Not necessarily homegrown because of Calvin Bassey, etc. But you're still talking about players moving down south, or eventually ending up down south because England has the money to be able to try and pay for them as well. Something which I think is quite interesting as well, Alan, because there's been a lot of noise and a lot of talk, and we've been discussing it on our Patreon site, which is the possibility for Ryan Kent coming back. Now, what I will say, folks, is that again, if you are on our Patreon site and you've had the chance to comment on any of the pods and the daily updates that we've discussed this in, I think, Alan, the response from our listening community has been pretty negative towards the idea. I totally understand why. I'm in that camp myself. It hasn't worked out for him in terms of his move across to Turkey, and I think that there was various stories which came out in the Turkish press which related him with a move back to the UK, a club in Scotland and a club in England. Now, the default option would obviously be ourselves because of his wages and obviously the relationship that we have with him. I can't see why this move is viable. I just can't understand it. And I'm fairly sure that if I have to read the reaction of the fan base, I think if Kent was to come back, I just don't think it would be well received.
No, I think if it had been a couple of years earlier, at that point in time, clearly with the way he first came into the Rangers side and so on, signed him up the European, kind of run as well, definitely. But I think I was going to not tarnish, but I think the impact of the last year in terms of his kind of level of performance and his kind of contribution or not in terms of what he did. I think it was only a couple of goals or whatever, but the likes of him and like Alfie and so on, and I don't know, just the way they kind of petered out, I think that's kind of harmed our views of him as well. And a big question mark for me would be if he then came back, is it just a case of I kind of thought I could have got something better, I haven't, but I'm just going to kind of settle for you. And what would his attitude be like? Now, I know it may be different because Clement obviously kind of was looking at him before and so on, and it may change, but just instinctively, Cammy, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right for me.
No, and again, as you mentioned there, obviously Clement was looking at him when he was rumoured with a move to Bruges, and obviously that's when Clement was manager there. I think by and large, Alan, I just don't see how it fits. It feels very much square peg round hole.
Yeah.
And I understand why if there's people there who think, well, maybe you could come back and it'd be a new lease of life. I just think that he would have to come back and play so well to be able to convince some of the people who don't want him here that it would be out of this world type performances. And I can't. It just feels too difficult for him to be able to try and do. So again, like you say, if I don't see much of that move being able to try and materialise where it would come back to Rangers. I think for him, he could try something completely different and try with the experience and with the game time and with everything that he's been able to get in both England and Scotland and to a less extent Turkey, been able to go to England and maybe given it a crack down there. He obviously was linked with English clubs previously. I think Leeds were very, very interested in him. But again, like you say, we'll have to try and take it from there. Let's move on to Sunday then, Alan. And I'll be honest with you, I'm eagerly anticipating Rangers being able to try and come back. But as much as we've spoken about some of those players who have been away on international duty, what I'm also hoping as well is that for some players who I think it's been quite obvious they do need a bit of a breather. I'm looking at you, James Tavernier, that they've had the opportunity to get a rest, a little bit of kind of recuperation, been able to try and get some downtime. And I'm really interested to see as to how we kick back off again up at Pittodrie on Sunday. I think that the manager now he's starting to formulate a plan of where he sees something towards a best 11 from the players that he has at the moment, and obviously those players who are returning from injury.
I think so, yeah. I mean, he'll obviously know as well in terms of some gaps because he'll probably think out of even like an 11 come January. He'll have to look at potentially bringing players in. But no, you're right. The shape, I think we could see it, and that was one of the criticisms, obviously, of Michael Beale. It was like, what shape are we actually playing? The players don't seem to know where their roles are within the side and so on. Certainly over the past month or so, that there's a lot more clarity there as well. I think it's a good point as well. You mentioned about Tav and some of the others just getting a breather as well, because it must have been quite a lot kind of emotionally. Don't laugh. I know they get loads of money and so on, but the fact that suddenly one manager's out, the other one's in, what's the impact going to be and so on. So I think you're right. I think this Sunday it's going to be really interesting to see how things go. As I say, not happy clappy, but honestly, I just feel that if we can go in there and just continue in the vein that we did before we break, I think we've got some real positivity, kind of coming up there. And as I say, Aberdeen I know they'll raise their game and so on, but then that's up to us, isn't it, Cammy, just to, play to our kind of standards and really just put them to the sword.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you can do is you can obviously take into account the fact that you can be respectful of opposition. However,
Yeah.
I think at the same time, you can be respectful and disrespectful, if that makes sense. I think what we've been guilty of at the time, and again, Aberdeen probably fall in this bracket with a lot of people, because I know fans and you know fans as well, who it does feel like as if there's an extra bit of needle against Aberdeen because they want to be able to try and create it against us. I'm happy to respect an opponent in terms of what they are trying to do, but I also want to try and make sure that they realise that they have to step up numerous levels to get to our standard. We absolutely should not sink to them. And I think under Michael Beale, there was times where it felt a little bit like he was trying to overthink it. Now Clement feels like he's got a little bit of momentum, a little bit of rhythm, makes it easier. And I think what's interesting, Alan, you've heard players talk about why that's really, really important.
Yes.
And almost to a certain extent, not necessarily saying that they fully understand the design yet, because I don't think it's finished. I don't think it's at a formal stage where it's that's the blueprint and that's what we play to, etc.
No.
Because there's various moving parts into it. We mentioned about players coming back into it. He needs to be able to implement that. What I do see from these players is almost a renewed approach in terms of how they play their football. And you see guys getting their opportunity. We've spoken already about Ross McCausland. I'll go back to Scott Wright. Sadly, got a knock, and he's on his way back from injury, etc. But it just shows you that he has stood by his initial statements that everyone will get an opportunity, and there's almost a freedom, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the manager as well. He's got this, I'm a winner. It's all about winning. Obviously he's been successful elsewhere. I do think he's came here, with that old mindset of it's Glasgow Rangers. It's this team. All of these, whether it's Aberdeen, Hearts, Hibs, St Mirren, whatever it would be, Cammy. And in all my time, certainly since the 70s, it always happened. Suddenly teams would raise their game against us. The following week they'd get beat 4-0 with goodness knows what, but they do it. But I think it was like kind of Joke Wallace and whatever, and it would just be a case of we go out there, to them it's going to be this battle early on. That's fine. Match them, win the battle, be strong, but ultimately get down to the football, and ultimately the quality will see us through. And I just think this is the mindset. It's not been disrespectful for these teams at all, because it's just a case of there are certain levels. They'll know themselves, we've got to up it. But Rangers have just got to recognise that, Cammy, and go, that's fine, bring it on. But and there's definitely been, I don't know, a wee bit of evidence over the past few weeks that we can do that now. I think defensively as well, we've tightened up a fair wee bit, and we're now looking a bit sharper as well, aren't we, in terms of the pace and so on that we've got up front.
Well, I think the pace, but also the finishing, and there's absolutely no doubt in terms of what we've seen in terms of what Danilo has brought us. It is interesting, Alan, because I'm always a big believer in the fact that when you're talking about strikers, every striker plays with degrees of confidence. And I was like, this is why it's so ironic in terms of it wouldn't be Rangers unless we'd managed to be able to get Cyril Dessers a goal against Livingston after we've missed a penalty. Yeah. And then we come into an international break. Whereas in actual fact, what you were hoping was get my goal and then hopefully get another game and then be able to try and do it. Now, there'll be people listening to this going, listen, Dessers is a busted flush. There's, what can we get? The simple fact is, right, in the football economics, you're not going to be able to just simply say, right, let's get rid of him, because who's going to want to buy him for first instance, right? But the second thing is, if you've got, and I'm going to speak almost with the non-human head on here, right, because you're absolutely right, these are football players who are humans, there's emotions attached to it. But as a business, he is an asset. And if you can get something out of that asset, fantastic. Because ultimately, you're paying him every week. You've spent money on him and investment on him. I don't know what the next steps are for Cyril Dessers, right? I genuinely don't. But I think he has to be involved at some part, even if it's going to be the case that he maybe has to play a little bit of a protection role in there as well for Danilo. In terms of Danilo can't play 90 minutes, it's going to exhaust them in terms of what happens. It's really important for us to be able to try and see how we can get a tune out of some of these other players as well.
I would agree. I mean, we've seen, I don't know, Dessers since when, maybe July-ish or whatever. I think during the Michael Beale stuff, well, everybody was all over the place, so I'm prepared just to kind of draw a line under it. I think you're right now. The past few weeks, there's been wee bits. Again, it's going to be hard work, but I mean, we've got to. I mean, as you say, the money we've paid for him, the money that we're actually paying him, kind of in terms of salary and so on, we've got to. So hopefully they'll be able to come up with something that'll allow, as you say, if he's not playing all the time, but even as maybe a combination, or in terms of this 9 games before Christmas, you're going to need, certain periods where you use more of the squad. So I'm certainly not for kind of throwing him away just now, Cammy. I think that would be foolhardy. and hopefully we'll get something. But the likes of Big Sema as well, I mean, goodness sake. I mean, that's a classic example. If you'd said to me at the start of August, what do you think about Sema? I'd be like, well, he can run a bit, can't he? And it is amazing how things, and you mentioned confidence as well. It's just amazing how in strikers too, suddenly you maybe get a goal, you get a wee run, and you just don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to come on to Seaman just as let's talk about Seaman now because I was also going to talk about Sam Lammers as well. But I think what's been really interesting, Alan, that Seema really has been doing some great work for us. It has been interesting, however, that he obviously his goals have dried up, and that's fine. I don't have any issue with that at all because again you'll have hit a wee purple patch in terms of finding the back of the net. He did a very, very unselfish role when we were across in the Czech Republic, where he was more or less playing, more defensively than we would have expected to see from him. But I think, as I say, he performed that role really, really well. There's definitely some positives that Seema brings us because I think even when he's not scoring goals,
he's making a contribution, isn't he?
He's contributing elsewhere. He's one of those players as well where I think he just looks like as if the minute that he gets the ball in front of him and he has it at his feet, or maybe he has to run onto it, that he just wants to be put. He just wants to penetrate. He just wants to go and run it at defenders. He wants to be able to get the ball up the park. So even though the goals, haven't been there, I think what was the last game he scored in? Was it Hibs maybe? The goals have dried up. That's fine, but he's absolutely contributing in other ways. I think he's going to be very, very useful for us, not only just against Aberdeen, but again with one eye on midweek against Aris as well, because that is a very, very important game as well.
Yeah, he's opening things up as well, as you say, because and I love the fact that he does that wee kind of pause and the defender goes, okay, and then he just goes, drop a gear, there you go. But by doing that immediately, someone else has got to come from centre right or wherever to go over to kind of move there. And that's creating things again. So as you say, although he's not on the end of them, just his movement and so on, and this direct kind of pace, it's opening things up. Whereas we didn't have that before. It was, teams in this shape, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Well, we can't really get in behind you. But as you say, the way he plays, to me, it adds a few dimensions. I think it also shows as well to some of the others as well, the likes of Cantwell and so on. It's not just about all the creative side too, and there needs to be both parts of your game. I don't mean to take that away from the creative ones, but I think Seema has shown, okay, I might not want to do that, but he is prepared to dig in, and I think that's a good message across the rest of the squad as well.
Yeah, and I think what's also good, and again coming on to Sam Lammers as well, what's going to be interesting within this is being able to try and get an idea from, I suppose, getting a tune out of Sam Lammers is going to be interesting. Now, I'm going to put myself in the fence. I've said this before, Alan, right, and I've kind of stuck my neck out a little bit for him because one of the things I think Sam Lammers is guilty of is overthinking it. I think sometimes he takes a touch too much. Mm-hmm. I think that he maybe does really well in terms of being able to try and control the ball. And I don't necessarily mean like his first touch. I mean just within tight spaces, right? If he's in close quarters, he can hold on to the ball pretty well. He can beat a man. He can take the ball away from the man, etc. But that final decision wrecks him. And for whatever reason, right, it's just something which I think is in his head at times. Then, obviously, we go up to Dens Park and he scores an absolute belter. And again, we mentioned before about Dessers, scores a great goal up at Dens Park as well. It's interesting because we've had his ex-coaches say that this player has got technique, he has got quality, and I actually think you can see glimpses of it. This is a player who I think does have some potential, but I think we need to be able to nurture it slightly. I think we need to be able to try and bring a little bit more out of him, give him that game time. He obviously, as I say, scored that fantastic goal. I don't want to see him excluded from the squad. I don't want to see him omitted because, again, like I say, I'm not saying that his performances have been anywhere near good enough. But as we start seeing players return, like Tom Lawrence, I absolutely understand the manager's conundrum in terms of whether or not he plays Lawrence, or if he wants to put Lammers in there as a different option. Obviously, McCausland we've spoken about as well. There's definitely options in there. But if Sam Lammers is going to hit a degree of form, again, as you mentioned before, you have to think about how you use your resources pragmatically when you've got so many fixtures coming up, including within the next month, a League Cup final.
You're right, and there is a footballer in there. You don't come through the PSV kind of youth, PSV, and have played at, Atalanta, or even over in Sampdoria and things, and the kind of, the kind of Netherlands, kind of under-19s and so on. You can see the guy's got something, whether it's to do with, I don't know, the aggression side of things, or whatever, I don't know, but there's no doubt you don't get to this stage, Cammy, without having any sort of, technique and so on. So he has got that. Again, I think a couple of them, the likes of Dessers, obviously him too. I think this is where Clement will really be looking, won't he, and going, is there a wee trick, in terms of how could I get a wee bit more out of them? Can I get them to do something differently? This will be something that will be. And as I say, he's certainly got a run of games where he can do it. And he's not the worst either, isn't he? It's just the frustration about you beat a guy, I'll go back again, I'll try and beat him again. And as you say, maybe just taking one touch too much. Certainly domestically in Scotland, you can't really do that. Can you, Cammy? You've really got to move it quicker. Yeah.
I mean, you can do, but I think that, again, kind of coming back
if you're Ronald de Boer, maybe.
Well, possibly, but I think that coming back to what we've spoken about with regards to manager's style of play and how he wants to be able to approach the game, it definitely feels to me like, he wants to be able to get forward. We have the option, Alan, and I think that we have it within our skill set to be able to move the ball at pace, and I think that will always worry teams, right? That sounds really basic, but I think we have the assets to be able to try and do that. What we need to be able to try and do more than anything else is look at where, if we're not going to use them all, in some of the slightly, I wouldn't say bigger, but the key games that are kind of coming up, then yeah, for sure, would I be looking to be able to try and get more kind of game time involved against, St Mirren at Ibrox, etc., Dundee at Ibrox. That's fine, right? That's fine because you're then using those resources. I just think that we're going to have players. We won 55 based on players being able to try and go through small purple patches. And I think that the manager wants to be able to try and stick by some of those players that he can see that are in form. And maybe right now we're just in a place where we can't fully write everyone off yet. We have to be able to try and give them a bit of leeway in terms of what happens.
And I think he's on the record as saying that he wants to keep all of his squad up to a certain level of kind of fitness and so on, so that when...
Well, he said he's not been happy with it since he came in, and he's definitely moving it a lot more in the right direction.
And what he did say is he wants to have them all up to that level so that when they are asked to come on, they can contribute. So as you say, even by giving them... Now you've got so many more substitutes as well, and the game goes on longer, even by getting them to play the odd 25 minutes and so on, keeping it... That is important because, as you say, it allows them to chop and change. If somebody's potentially struggling a wee bit, put them on, but also just a case of resting them. So you end up with rather than 11 of them, you've got 15 or 16 of them, Cammy, that are pretty much ready and at a certain standard, throughout the next so many games.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting as well because there's a lot of what we talk about with that little bit of added pressure, Alan, with the fact that lot are obviously playing on Saturday, so therefore we come back to that scoreboard pressure scenario. I can't even tell you who they're playing, but they're at home, so presumably they'll probably win. We
won't be looking in the Podders chat anyway, won't we? No?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You don't want to jinx anything, yeah.
Yeah, but listen, you have to make your own luck as far as I'm concerned in this game. But what we need to be able to try and do is make sure that if we do have a slightly increased gap in the league table, that our job is to get that shut back down as soon as possible.
Yeah,
and I probably would have questioned the character of some of these players under the previous manager. Under this manager, I don't. And so, we're going to be in this scenario, Alan. This is what's going to happen. If we're still talking about European football post-New Year, then we're going to have to talk about, the likelihood that lot will probably be playing on the Saturday. We'll have to play on the Sunday. And then as a result of that, we are just going to have to make sure that we continue to match them step for step and hopefully get to the point where we can overtake them. But right now, we just have to remove that, that background noise out of our heads. It's about being able to go up to Pittodrie and from midday on Sunday make sure that we start positively and on the front foot.
Yeah, all we do is look at ourselves, and as a manager would say, you go up to Aberdeen, you win, regardless of people going, oh, wonder how Rangers have gone, and each victory, and then you go next week and you win in Europe, shit, well, that's Rangers through to the next round, another £500,000, whatever else this, oh damn, and it's just a case of knocking them off one at a time. That'll build up pressure elsewhere, and if we can, as I say, be as consistent as we've been recently, Cammy, yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot to play for, isn't there?
Yeah, 100%. As I say, there's going to be loads of game time coming up as well, and plenty of opportunities for players to be able to try and come in and deliver against that as well. That will pretty much do us for extra for this week, folks. We've mentioned already, and we always do in every show, but if you are not part of our Patreon community on Heart and Hand, so patreon.com/Heart and Hand. If not, why not? Please come over and join us. We've got the business end of 7,000 paying subscribers who come over and they get great content for as little as a couple of quid a month. We do loads of different content in there as well, which will keep you entertained during international break. And we've had some brilliant pods and content. My thanks to all of our podding team who have produced some great stuff whilst we've been missing the Rangers. Not least my guest on this week's extra, Mr. Alan Bradley. You've went from retiree into almost full-time professional podcaster. If you can do it, anyone can do it, Alan. You've always said.
I think the silver surfer, I think we called it, because I think at the first point saying to you, what do I do? How do I actually record it, Cammy? Oh, just send the stuff to me. How do I send it to you? So I've moved on a wee bit since then, haven't I? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
After 2 years, though, I think your wife every Sunday night had you with headphones on listening to, hi, it's Alan here, yeah.
Always the start of that call, because it was always on the Monday morning slot as well. It's always just to hear Alan's tone, and it's on a Sunday when we were sorting his pod out. But like you say, if you fancy coming over, if you'd like to be a podder, then why not come over? If you've got a show idea, please feel free to raise it to us, and we'll do everything we can to be able to try and support you in making that come together as well. Thank you to our show sponsors, Zenith Coins. Please head on over to zenithcoins.com. If you are coming along to our live show at New Edmondson House next week, please look forward to what's going to be a great night, not only with myself and the other numpties on stage, but once we've got through that, we will be joined by one of, certainly in my opinion, one of the greatest strikers ever to play for Rangers, which is Mark Catley. And Mark is always good form. If anyone's ever had the opportunity to hear him speak, an absolute gentleman until the last. I'm really, really excited to be on stage with him, and I think he's going to have a lot of great stuff for us, Alan, to be able to share about some of the amazing goals that he's scored for the club.
Yeah, it should be great. Yep, yeah.
I'm going to say to people at the show, please don't let me forget this, Alan, that every single time he calls McCoist Alistair, I'm going to ask the crowd to celebrate like they've just seen a goal, because I love it when he does it. So, yeah, absolutely. And again, like I say, thank you to our executive producers in London, Mike Lee and Paul Myers. David will be back with you on Monday, folks, with the flagship dissecting, hopefully, a win up at Pittodrie on Sunday. Until then, have a brilliant weekend. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.